Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Anna Sabramowicz, and with me today I have a special guest, Eva Daniels. And Eva is an instructional designer and also a member of our Interactive Storytelling Accelerator program, and somebody who just recently launched her own interactive story to join the ranks of creative directors out there. Eva, thanks so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you for the invitation.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And I love your shirt, which I'm going to obviously after the interview, I'm going to ask you where you got it because it's so beautiful. Anyways. This is so cool. One of the things that I love is that, everybody in our community designs interactive experiences, but once in a while you get one that's people can actually experience because they're not all behind some closed doors. So this is super cool because we'll talk about something that people can actually go jump into and experience later on. So I hope they do that because it's super fun. So now, but before we get into all that, what did you do before you joined us? Give us a little bit of how you got into ID, a little bit about you. Wow. That'd be fun.
Okay. So I'm an e-learning developer, and it's funny, I was actually working at a medical library. This was eons ago, and they were in-person instructors. They were librarians, and they would go across the United States teaching the medical databases. And there was this kind of call for, this is when e-learning was sort of I don't know, it was just really thought of just what if we kind of made these, these in-class trainings online? And I was just like, that's a fascinating idea, because I was actually in grad school at the time, just for literacy and literacy instruction. So I was like, I think after I finished my grad work here, I'm going to do online learning. And it was just so weird because looking back years ago of just that decision, and I know it was just definitely a faith-based decision, because who would have known right here where we are now, it was just such a mind-blowing faith-based decision. It was just only a God moment. I know it was. So I went to, I went for my e-learning degree, I did it online because I wanted to experience what it felt like to be online, engaging in e-learning grad work. And it was really an interesting journey because you get to see what that distance is. There's an e-distance that you really have to traverse as an instructor. Because I think when you're in class and you're teaching, it's much easier to read body language, to kind of say, oh, I see you don't understand. Your face is kind of oh, okay, let me. But when you're doing, you can't see anyone's faces, but you still have to have this intimacy. It's almost like intrusive advisement. You have to be in their face, and you have to traverse that. So I did my master's with e-learning design and implementation. And then I worked at a college setting as an educational technology director there. And then I'm currently in my role as a senior e-learning developer, where it's kind of really zeroed in on storyline, where I work on that. And it was just wild that decision, it's a quick decision I made years ago, just where we are now, just with online learning and just how prevalent and how important it is, so.
I'm actually surprised that after you took that distance learning course, you weren't nah, this sucks. Maybe not. It could have been really bad, right?
It could have been, but I think my instructors, the professors, really knew what they were doing. I think that means everything. It's everything that, I think sometimes people don't, well, maybe they do recognize the importance of the teacher and the educator who's actually helping the learner. It is very important that they have a grasp of what the information that they're delivering, and also just what the audience needs, especially an online audience. And they really knew. It was a really great program, and it inspired me just to, stay in e-learning and develop more.
Yeah. And now you're basically the Articulate maven. I mean, most of you, we'll get into this later, but we'd have coaching sessions where it'd be hey, maybe we should do this. And then Eva comes back next day. Yeah. How about this? And I'm oh, you just did it. That's awesome. Just whipped it up. It's so cool. I love it. So, okay. So, how did you find out about the program?
I honestly had been stalking you a little bit.
Ooh,
I
I like
had.
that. I
I
like
did
stalking.
because yeah. It's funny, I actually watched interviews of like, participants in the program. And I had read Crucial Conversations, and I had actually started drafting a storyline file because I really loved the strategies discussed in the book. And I knew that was like really a great opportunity for an interactive story. And of course, like we all know Broken Coworker, like that was just like something that you're just like, that's what I want to create. Like, I want to create something engaging that has customized feedback. That was something that was really important. And I knew an interactive story could do that. I'd read Cassie Moore and I had created branch scenarios, but I wanted something that had more decision points, and that also the feedback was customized to what the learner put in. So whatever the learner, I wanted it to be individual, differentiated instruction, that type of idea. So looking through the interviews, I think that is what kind of made me take the leap. I think one of the major things that caught my attention was one of the participants mentioned there was this like methodical way of doing things, and that was important. I was just like, if there's a plan, there's a method, then I was just like, okay, that's very attractive to me. So that has kind of made me kind of take the leap to say, okay, I'm gonna investigate and inquire more about
Yeah,
it.
because I remember us talking, you were like, well, I already have a plan and I've already done all this research, right? So I was like, just gonna jump in anyways. That's cool, right? Because now when you jumped in, obviously you had some expectations. So tell me, what were some things that maybe surprised you or weren't what you expected, or were different than you expected?
I asked a lot of questions. I think I remember during our session, I asked a lot. So I wasn't really too, because I'm the quiz master. I
You
asked a lot
are.
of questions. So I wasn't really surprised by anything. I think I was really, I guess, delighted by the community of designers. I really like the fact that you're around other designers, they understand you. There's a jargon that you understand. Like if I start talking about variables or triggers or layers, they're like, yeah, I know. And it was just really cool to be in that space, because then people are they can give you feedback, and you're just like, okay, I can take, because you understand what I'm talking about, and because you're also another designer. So that was really, I like that. I like that a lot. It wasn't really surprising. It was more of a delight. I think it's really cool to be in your community of people, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, cool. No, I like that. And I mean, it's funny because I think that our community is kind of like, we're really focused on just the one thing, right? So we don't have convos about like, AR or all this stuff. We're just really like, how do you find that? Is that a cool thing, or is that
Well, for me, it met my goal. I
Mhm.
mean, I kind of knew what I wanted to come in with. I wanted to create a portfolio piece, but I just wanted to also go deeper into storyline. I wanted to expand my skills, and I knew interactive story, I could go deeper with it. I had started and I did a project, but I wanted to just really get more sophisticated, and I wanted that nuanced decision making.
Mhm.
Because I'm even during our, when we had meetings, it was just the idea of like, I don't want things to be easy. I want things to be problematic, things that people would actually have a problem solving, because then it's relevant. And what I always just remember with adult learners, it has to be relevant. Like no one needs to sit down and waste time and engage in a story that they know already. We're not here to kind of explain things. We want to engage you with something that you don't know, something that will kind of bring you to another space. So I'm very, especially now with everything going on, I'm very cognizant of people's time, and that for adults, it has to be relevant. It has to be something that they can pick up and go, okay, I can use this, so that was really important to me.
So you mentioned crucial conversations. So tell us a little bit about crucial conversations, and then how this kind of inspired you. Like, why did you pick this one? What's going on there?
So I work at a training center, and they were training this at my, at my job. And I bought the book. I was just like, sounds interesting, because it would actually come up during meetings. And I read it and I was just like, wow. So Crucial Conversations is like a strategy manual, and it's a strategy manual of how to deal with high stakes conversations. So if you have a sensitive issue or something that causes like real like angst, because a lot of times people don't want to deal with conversations, they kind of want to avoid it. They're just like, oh, that's too, the person will be mad at me. And this book kind of gave one of many strategies. One of the strategies that I focus on in my interactive story was the state strategy. And it's a way to stay in control when you're having a high stakes conversation, because sometimes what happens is, you're going back and forth with someone and they say something to trigger you emotionally, and you don't want to fall for that trigger, because then you start trying to win the conversation or get over on someone or try to get back at someone because they disrespected you. And it's a way for you to hold a strategy and to say, okay, I have to stay in control because I know what this person is doing. And it's hard because you kind of have to be very self-aware. So there's a self-awareness part to it, but it's also it's an acronym state that tells you what to do and how to do it. So I really like the idea, because it wasn't just something you can use at work. You can actually use it in your personal life and just use it all over the place. It's just the idea of having something so you don't blow up at someone, but you actually preserve the relationship, because really that's the goal. And I think something that was mentioned in Crucial Conversations, like, what is the goal of your communication? Is it to win, or is it to preserve the relationship and get both of your needs met? So with the state strategy, it's acronym. So state is share your facts. The T is tell your story. A is ask for other people's paths. And the last two are how you do that. So you talk tentatively. Don't ever talk in absolutes. You never want to say, well, I think that you did this because that's what it is. And then the last letter is encourage testing. So you always want to encourage people to test what you're saying, because you're constantly negotiating meaning. And also it kind of prevents this hierarchy of when you're having a conversation with someone, like, well, I know I'm all knowing and I'm the person with the knowledge and I'm telling you. It's like, no, I may be wrong. So I need to find out the information from you. So that strategy in a nutshell, I took it out of Crucial Conversations, and I'm just like, how can I put it in a context that's work related? And that came up with Joe and Gina working, in an office together, and he has to address her lateness problem. So
I loved it. I thought it was, what's really cool is that this model is really conducive to something that already has such a structure, right? Because you can then overlay it, but you have to think through these things. And I think you really did. Now, what's cool is that you did contextualize it. And I hope the authors appreciate that. Seriously, they better be watching this, because you can talk about these things, but that self-awareness, even, like, that's a big ask, right? So you got to practice doing those things, making those decisions. So yeah.
And I think that's what makes this interactive story a perfect vehicle for it, because it's a safe place to practice it,
It is.
and because you can like swap out the situations. I can practice in a low stakes environment with a high stakes problem and make the mistakes online. And I think that this is a perfect vehicle for e-learning in this way, and for an interactive story, because I can mess up and not be fired at my job or have to be on probation or something. I can say, oh, that wasn't the best decision, because I got my customized feedback, and maybe I can try again and do it another way. So it's like, it just can be. And I mean, while it was quite challenging coming up with the decision points, so they are nuanced, that's where the gold is, I think, where it's just like someone saying, oh, I'm going to do this again. Because I think I remember when I posted the link on LinkedIn, and someone's like, I'm going to go through it again. And I'm like, I wonder if they like got to to a certain decision point and then they have to start again, which is kind of cool, because they kind of want to start it again. And I was just like, that's cool, so.
I want to see how it turns out differently, if they do it differently, which is like super win, right? That's
Definitely.
awesome. That's super cool. So, so tell us a little bit more about like the development of your story. So you came up with, you had this crucial conversations, and then how did you get started? How did you come up with Joe and Gina?
It's so funny because I had this idea of, it was a guy, it wasn't actually Gina originally, it was a guy. And I was just like, I was going through the Interactive Story Accelerator, like ISA, I was just sort of like, wait a minute, like I really need to make the character like relatable. And I realized kind of the way I had it set up, he wasn't really, the person wasn't relatable who was the supervisor, and the narrative voice, it was off. And I know, I mean, you know this because this was a conversation we did have in our meetings, which it was really helpful because it was a different way to write, which I really wasn't, usually I was writing in third person. And when I would create scenarios, you're looking at everyone involved and you're narrating what's going on. And you're doing that third person, this happened next, then this, what do you do? But I was the learner and I'm in Joe's body. So back to why I chose Joe, it really came through going through ISA and just going through, the course. And then as I'm kind of going through the steps, you have to like analyze the problem. So kind of like the way it changed to Joe and Gina from what it was, as I was analyzing the problems, as I was gathering more information, I was just like, okay, Joe kind of has to be a different person. He has to be relatable. He has to be likable. And Gina, she kind of she has to be someone that you're not sure about, because that's what's going to pique the interest of the learner. And she can't just be someone who's come in like, I have this problem, I'm sorry, I'm late. Like she has to kind of, she has to be kind of unpredictable and just kind of just like, I don't know what's really going on. And so really going through the training, having those conversations with you and Ryan, it was just like, okay, there needs to be intrigue. There needs to be something that the learner doesn't know. So really the change really came with going through it. I also identifying the problem, because I think one thing that was really great about going through the training was the fact that you had worksheets and we were, okay, we have to analyze what the problem is. What problem is this interactive story addressing? Because I think what I had before, there was a problem, but it wasn't really like a major, I more was focused on, oh, this person is, they're late and they're horrible. And it's just like, okay, but what's the problem? Because there's a lot of horrible late people coming to work, but what's really the problem? Like, who cares? Like, why does anybody care about this? And I think going through the training, going through the worksheets, working it out, and there was a lot of revision. There was a lot of throwing things out, a lot of that, lots of that. But it was okay because, it refined the story. It made it more just clean. And I don't mind, like, I like revision. I like feedback because it's going to make my end product even better. So for me, like, really what started from the beginning, what changed to Joe and Gina, it really was the course and asking the question and cutting and slicing and just going through, just analyzing what's the problem here. And also just with Ryan, and you talked about this, the idea of creating an interesting story. Like you need to have characters that are fun, that are interesting, that present a conflict, that have like, that are a little edgy, that like all of that is a part of creating this world where Joe and Gina exist. And it's not just saying, okay, Gina did this, then Joe did that. What do you think? What's your choice? It's no, you're immersing someone in a world. And I think, and ISA, like, helped me move from what I had to where I am now, with just picking Joe and Gina and making them the way that I did. Yeah. So
I like you added like, because real world is really, it's complex. There's nuance. There's like, and I love the fact that you did make Gina kind of like, you don't know if you like her, like, is she just being a jerk? Is she, like, so I love that. And that to me makes that conversation that you're teaching them even more valuable, because it's not their bestie. It's like, it's this wild card. You're like, but you got to stay cool with it, right? Like, I love that. And I thought that was well done. And then the one thing I really want to give you kudos for is that, like, I'm thinking, if we looked at the evolution of your script from the initial idea, and even Joe, right? How we were like, Joe's kind of a jerk right at the beginning. Like, I don't want to help him. And then you just kept on iterating and taking the feedback and just coming up with ideas. It's like, it's so cool to where it's gotten now. Because I think all of us have like seriously learned. And even the transition from moving it into that visual novel style, which I think is right. Tell me about that. How did that go?
That was rough. That was rough for a while because again, like, I'm third person. Like, I have to set my scene with everybody. Everybody has to be in the back. I set up my background. Then everybody has to be in perspective. Then everybody has to have the right lighting. And it's like, no, that's not the point of view we're looking. And like, I spent a lot of time on those pictures. I remember just in that, first draft. And it's weird because it was something that was being said, and I don't know, it was one meeting we had, it just clicked. And I was like, oh, I'm Joe. And it was weird. It's like, I'm Joe. And I have to look through Joe's eyes. And the learner is looking through Joe's eyes. And I have to make them feel like they're Joe. And that's the important part of making that connection with them through story, through the narrative, that the aesthetics, the visuals support that narrative voice. Because also I had to get down the scripting, because the voice of the scripting, then there was another level with the voice of the visuals. So it was rough, but once I got it, I think it started flowing and,
Yeah.
But it was just, but I loved learning just something new. It was just another way to write. It was another way to create a story, to create an e-learning experience. And I really, it was just kind of like, it took me a minute, but I was just like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I remember being on that aha moment, and you're like, oh, and then you came back the next time and I was like, it's all done. It's all redone. It was awesome. It was so cool. So for your build, obviously you used Articulate because that is your masterful tool of choice. And then for your visuals, where did you go for your visuals?
I went to e-learning art for my visuals, and I manipulated, bent, cut, snipped in Adobe Photoshop.
You totally did.
Yes, totally did. I did. E-learning art has really great facial expressions and the nice nuanced looks. Like, Gina really gave a lot of facial expressions. Even, Scott, he was one of the employees. Like I love that, because you want something that's natural. And that's something that people can connect to. That's not too outlandish and wacko. Like, you want something that's very, that people can say, okay, that's a normal facial expression I would see, in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. So. It's not Atsumi or whatever. Right. There. And it's interesting. I know I pick on her, but one of the things is, there's a time and place for using those kinds of like over the top kind of craziness. But with you, with your story, because you're kind of interacting with the same character over and over, there's these, like you said, there's these nuances, and you were able to find them. And Gina also has this resting, unpleasant face, which I can't say on TV. You're like, oh, she already looks like unapproachable. So.
But that makes it so great, because you don't know, and that's why it was like her facial expressions were perfect for what I was trying to do. So yeah. Absolutely.
No, it was great. And I hope everybody gets to experience it, because it's super fun. Now, as far as you mentioned some skills, you already came in with a really strong Articulate storyline knowledge and skill set. As far as if you could think of one skill that you felt like you honed over this process, what would it be?
You know what? I feel like I'm skilled in storyline, but I think I went deeper into storylines regards to efficiency. And when I say efficiency, it's using the tool in an efficient way so you can focus on the script. And what was set up was the use of states in such an expert way. I never would have thought of using it that way, like the states and using them for background. It was just so, it was like, it was just so simple and elegant. And I was just sort of like, oh my goodness, like, why am I dropping pics on every and I mean, and it works. I mean, it works when you're working with it, but it's not elegant. So I think like I think I just kind of delve deeper into storyline from an advanced standpoint. And also just seeing how other people do it and reverse engineering. I think this idea of that was presented in ISA, this idea of looking at what works and reverse engineering and modeling. So I think this idea of like, I can do that. If I can bend storyline to my will, so to speak, I can do that. And I think those were like this idea of feeling like, wow, like I can do way more. So I think for me, it was like, had to do with storyline, but it had to do with like, I just kind of did a drop into storyline on a like deep abyss, which I was like, this is cool, you know? So I felt like it wasn't that it was actually deeper into storyline on an advanced level, on a level where it's like, oh no, I can now manipulate and do what I want to do with it. So I felt that.
Ryan's
Like
totally going to love that answer because, you know, efficiency, he's like, this is like his mantra. So he's going to.
It's just elegant. It was just so, and when I looked at, I was like, he just do that? I'm like, what is he doing? And I'm like, you can't do that. And I'm like, yes, you can. So it's just like, I just was. So, I mean, I'm probably like for my work, I'm going to be doing that from now on if I can get away with it. But it's just sort of like, yeah, it was just so elegant.
Fun. No, that's awesome. That's fabulous feedback. Yeah, that's cool. That makes sense. And I could see that resonating in your project because once you do it, why would you go back to any other way, right? You've seen The Matrix.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. So, do you have, if somebody's just joining or thinking of joining, what advice would you give to them to be best prepared?
You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Because I think when I first started, I was super nervous. Like, oh my gosh, am I making the right decision? And I mean, for me, it's like, you're going to be okay because Anna and Ryan know what they're doing and they're going to give you feedback. Like, it's like they're going to deep dive into your work and they're going to give you feedback and they're going to help you. And they're like going to hold your hand and help you. Like and I think for me, I was just like, can I do this? You know, and it's like, you're going to finish it. You know, but there's another piece of it, like you got to put in the work. Like that's the other side of it. But I feel like, you know, the designers who are there they're just so professional. They're so amazing. Just a community. They're just so on their, you know, they're just on their hustle. Like they know everyone's really on it. So, but just the idea is like, if you can meet, like bring your best, like you and Ryan bring yours and you're just like, let's do this. Like, and you're just like, all right, let me look through this. Let's like crunch it out. And it's just, you know, I'm not saying it's not going to be painful sometimes, you know, but I think that comes along with just feedback and just be open to the feedback, be open to, you know, just because I felt like you and Ryan just cared as much as I did about creating this amazing end product. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just me that's like, it needs to be great. It's just like, you're like, no, it needs to be great. And you need to do A, B, C, D to get it to be what it needs to be. Because right now it's not what it needs to be. And for me, I'm just like, okay, cool. Now what do I do? You know, I mean, and just be open to the feedback, because the feedback is meant to make the product great, not good, great, you know, and that's what I would tell people, like, just trust the process, but also bring your best to the process too, because you need both. Like, you need to be willing to like accept it, implement it, do the work. And I mean, but I don't think that's an issue for anybody at our in our group, but just the idea that just if you have both of those meeting, it's going to be fine.
That's great
That's what I would
advice.
say.
No, it's awesome. And thank you. That's humbling. So now if somebody wants to, well, what I'm thinking is you probably like your portfolio piece is basically taking a book and contextualizing it for uh, for audiences. So I may be speaking out of turn, but I'm thinking anybody who has a book where they have a process that humans would implement, that this would be like an amazing augmentation and almost an introduction to why somebody should even read that book, because it contextualizes everything. So I'm thinking some authors should be reaching out to you, right?
Yes, I do
Seriously.
too.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. And now, so if any authors or anybody else wants to reach out to you and also wants to experience this interactive experience, where should they go, Eva?
They can reach me on LinkedIn, and they can message me there. And also my the interactive story Conversations at Work is on my LinkedIn page.
Fabulous. And I'll put the link to Eva's LinkedIn and her interactive story underneath this video and in the show notes. So Eva, thank you so much for being
No
here.
problem. You're welcome.
It was so much fun. And thanks for sharing your insights. Like, seriously, I think you saying, hey, we're going to show up, but you also have to show up and bring the work and be open to feedback. I think that's brilliant. So thanks so much for that.
Oh, thank you.